Greetings from Mission Control and welcome to Space Station Live. It's Monday, September 9th, 2013, and you're getting a live look now inside of the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Inside the room right now, the Orbit 2 team looking over the crew and the systems of the International Space Station. They're being led today by Flight Director Tomas Gonzalez-Torres of Lightning Flight. Seated next to him at the Capcom position is NASA astronaut Katie Coleman, serving as the voice liaison between teams down here on the ground and the astronaut crews up in space. And that crew, Expedition 36, counting down its final days as 3 astronauts and cosmonauts prepare to depart the station. As of right now, though, they're still led by Russian cosmonaut Pavel Vinogradov in the front row on the left there. Behind him, another Russian cosmonaut, Alexander MISURKIN, and NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy. On the right side, the 3 astronauts that will be remaining on board the International Space Station. Russian cosmonaut Fyodor Yurchikhin in the front row on the right there. Behind him, from the European Space Agency, LUCA Parmitano, and all the way on the right, NASA astronaut Karen NYBERG. As mentioned, 3 will be departing the International Space Station tomorrow. Chris Cassidy, Pavel Vinogradov, and Alexander MISURKIN departing after almost 6 months spent on board the International Space Station. Right now, they're scheduled to undock at 6:35 p.m. Central Time. As with all dynamic events, we'll be bringing you live coverage on NASA TV, beginning with our hatch closure coverage at 3 p.m. All times are in Central. That final hatch closure after some farewells between the crew at 3:20. We'll resume our coverage later at 6:15 for that planned undocking at 6:35 p.m. We'll then break away and bring up our final broadcast for landing. That landing is scheduled to take place at 9:58 p.m. Central Time, just to the southeast of Zhezkazgan in Kazakhstan. Following that, we'll be bringing you a post-landing video file at 11:30 p.m. and then a post-landing activities video file the following day at 11 a.m. But as they continue to prepare for that landing, the crew is still very busy on board the International Space Station today, starting off with departing Commander Pavel Vinogradov. He's completing his final exercise run with the lower body negative pressure suit, a special suit that draws the fluids inside the cosmonauts' bodies back down into the legs, effectively exerting a force on their musculoskeletal system, just one of the ways that they're looking at combating the negative effects that microgravity have on these station residents during their long-duration stays on board the International Space Station. Also on the docket for the day for Vinogradov is packing a number of items into that Soyuz TMA-08M vehicle that will be carrying him and 2 others back down to Earth tomorrow. You can see a rough layout of the Soyuz craft. The middle part, known as the descent module, the only part that will survive the re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere, carrying the 2 cosmonauts and 1 astronaut, as well as a small contingent of cargo. Among that cargo will be some detectors from a Russian radiation study experiment known as Matryoshka that Vinogradov will be moving over into the Soyuz vehicle today. He'll also be completing the descent drill with his fellow Russian cosmonaut Alexander MISURKIN. And then finally, later this afternoon, Vinogradov will be participating in the ceremonial change of command ceremony, handing over command of the international outpost to his fellow Russian cosmonaut Fyodor Yurchikhin. That change of command ceremony taking place later this afternoon on NASA TV at 1:25 p.m. Central Time, 2:25 p.m. Eastern. Meanwhile, Alexander MISURKIN also doing that lower body negative pressure exercise and transferring some items over to the Soyuz himself. Among those items, he'll be transferring from the Russian bioecology study, which is seeking to use the radiation and microgravity environment of space to produce improved strains of microorganisms that can help improve the biodegradation of oil pollutants inside the environment. He'll also be doing some final air and microbial sampling throughout the Russian segment. Also on that Soyuz coming home, Chris Cassidy is collecting and preparing his final human research facility samples, taking some final blood, urine, and saliva samples that will be stored in freezers and used as part of the overall study of Cassidy, tracking his physical changes during his long-duration space flight. He'll also be accomplishing his final maintenance task while an expedition crew member, removing and replacing the water recovery system's fluids control and pump assembly inside of the Tranquility module. Meanwhile, oncoming Expedition 37 Commander Fyodor Yurchikhin will be assisting with some of those Soyuz packing items, and also setting up an Orlan battery pack, one of the battery packs from the Russian spacesuits used for spacewalks, setting that up for discharge, and again taking over command of the International Space Station later this afternoon. Meanwhile, European LUCA Parmitano taking some samples himself for the Human Research Facility on the U.S. segment. He'll also be preparing the combustion integrated rack for some upcoming experiments on board the station. That combustion integrated rack, the only combustion research facility on board the station, capable of handling a variety of combustion experiments in microgravity, such as the BASS experiment, or the burning and suppression of solids, providing a safe environment for these combustion experiments inside of the orbiting outpost. He'll also be setting up a robotic workstation, as he and Karen NYBERG will be participating in some rendezvous and grapple onboard training for the upcoming Cygnus vehicle. Cygnus, the orbital cargo ship, scheduled to launch just a little over a week from now on September 17th, will be doing its first cargo run to the International Space Station, demonstrating its successful completion of the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services contract. Meanwhile, Karen NYBERG removing 17 dosimeters from throughout the Japanese experiment module for return on that Soyuz craft, and also much of her day will be dominated by that Cygnus onboard training.